All right, everyone, welcome back to the Go 24/7 podcast. Bryce Koon alongside Glen West as we get into the second edition of our spring position previews. We talked about the offensive line and tight ends earlier in the week, and now we stretch it out a little bit to the skill positions. And Glenn, when I think a topic a lot of people heading into the spring ball are going to be really excited about the names that kind of emerge at these position groups. So we're going to be talking about wide receivers and running backs today. Before we get started, if you're watching over on our YouTube channel, make sure to subscribe. Hit the like button. That helps us in the algorithm. And if you listen to the podcast, maybe on your drive home from work, maybe you're at the gym, we would love if you would like and follow us wherever you get your audio podcast. Glenn, let's hop right into this because we've talked a little bit about the running back room. I think we've done a good job of that over the past couple of weeks. So we don't necessarily need to rehash everything, but I think we could start off right here. I mean, Sonny Ship said it, I think, about a week or two ago. It's very rare to have as much veteran talent coming back that LSU does. Now, currently, that's going to spring ball. Now, things could change in that second transfer window, but as of today, I think that as a fan, you have to feel pretty good about where LSU heads with the experience and the talent level that they bring back in the running back room.
Yeah, I mean, you've got 5 guys coming back for the spring, and 4 of those guys are 2, 3, 4-year players at the college level, and that's pretty rare, to have that kind of that talent, that depth at a position like running back. I think it's really important. I mean, when you look at what some of these guys did last year, it's going to be really important that they take another step. I think, you look at a guy like John Emery and some of the bouts that he's had in terms of missing time over his career at LSU, not getting on the field really early in his career. This is kind of like his second, I would say, probably full year where he's going to be expected to be a significant piece of this running back room, and that's going to be really important, I think, for him in terms of, can he be the explosive player that we saw at times last year at a more consistent rate? Can he limit the turnovers and the ball handling and whatnot? But I think it's really good problem to have if you're LSU. I mean, the obvious question there is, what happens after the spring if one guy feels he's on the short end of the stick? Does he hop in the portal and go somewhere where he feel like he can get a lot of playing time? I just shooting off the cuff here, but just one name that kind of makes sense in that respect is probably Armani Goodwin, in terms of just the injury history he has the last couple of years, not really being able to fulfill his immense potential. I mean, this was a guy who was a borderline 5-star running back coming out of college, coming out of high school, and so if he's still a little bit hampered with that injury, if they want to work him back slowly in the spring, then he's somebody that I could kind of fit that mold in terms of maybe a post-spring departure. But if you're able to hold on to all those guys, I mean, you got Noah Kane, John Emery, Josh Williams, Armani Goodwin, and then the 2 freshmen. Caleb Jackson isn't going to be here till the summer, but you get to incorporate Trey Holly into the group as well this spring. So yeah, a very deep group, but certainly there's going to be room for improvement, which I'm sure we'll get to here in a minute.
Yeah, you talk about room for improvement. I mean, what's a guy that you're really watching for? I mean, I think a lot of people, and we've talked about it extensively, is John Emery Jr. I mean, the protection, the ball protection. If he can protect the ball, look, we know his elusiveness. We know what he can do out of the backfield as a pass-catching option for this offense. You think he has the highest ceiling or the most to prove maybe this upcoming spring?
Yeah, I would say so. I think probably, the one thing that this group didn't do a whole ton of last year was break free into the second, the second level and make a bunch of explosive plays downfield. You saw that a lot from Jaden Daniels last year as a runner, but in terms of the actual running back room, I would say Emery was the best guy who did that for you, and there were only a handful of times that he was able to break one off and really get LSU in some valuable field position off of one of his plays. But yeah, I mean, that's got to be the biggest, I would say, point of emphasis, is just being a little bit more dynamic back there. And that's something that encompasses everybody on the offense. That's got to be the offensive line opening up holes. It's got to be the quarterback reading the right protections and where to hand the ball off, and and what hold to hit. It's on everybody really. The receivers on the outside, blocking, and really I think putting an emphasis on when you do make those running plays, making them as explosive as you can. And Emery fits that picture. I think Armani Goodwin fits that as well. I think he's a guy that if he can stay healthy and is a guy that LSU can really rely on in that respect in terms because he was a guy that was averaging I think 5 or 6 yards to carry before he got hurt.
Mhm.
So he has a lot of potential, a lot of not a ton of wear and tear on the body yet either. He had a kind of freshman year that was hampered by injury as well. But it's just been the injuries that have really kind of kept him from really unlocking his true potential.
I want to talk about Noah Kane in the sense of look, college football fans, I'm sure LSU fans too, tuned into him during his time at Penn State and the massive potential that he has. He comes to Baton Rouge, comes back home. What was kind of your assessment watching him this past season? I mean, there's some games where he shouldered the load, albeit maybe against some lesser opponents. The UAB game comes to mind in that sense. But what is his role maybe heading into spring? I mean, he's more of a bruiser, in my opinion, the running back. He's not a guy that's going to haul off a 40-yard run. But when you see this, I mean, what is his role coming into the spring? How does he fit into this mix?
Yeah, I mean, he was a move the sticks kind of guy for you last year. I mean, he didn't really get a ton of opportunity really until the tail end of the season, and he, I think, exceeded a lot of expectations. The coaching staff certainly had him a notch lower than Emery and Josh Williams and even Goodwin at the very beginning of the season. So, but I thought he's just a really good veteran presence for that room. He takes care of the ball. What you're going to get. We heard this a number of times from Coach Kelly last year. He's just, I think, dependable is the right word. He's not a guy that's going to, explode for many 40, 50-yard gains, but if you get him, in that second level, he can make you miss, and he can certainly try to run through you as well. I mean, he's a very physical, powerful running back, and so I think there's going to be a role for him next year. Absolutely, I think it just depends, honestly, on how much of a by committee approach they want to take this year. If there's somebody that makes a quantum leap in their game, do they really lean on them heavily? I think that's going to be a big question mark. But um, you know, I'm looking at Noah Kane filling a really nice complimentary role this year, and maybe for a guy like Josh Williams to finally take the lead back duties moving forward.
Yeah, and speaking on Williams, I mean, this is a guy that kind of emerged and was an option. And the biggest thing when you go back and watch games, Glenn, and I'm sure you saw this live, is this guy's just physical. I mean, he just does not quit. Multiple times, obviously, the game against Alabama comes to mind. I mean, there's multiple games, though, you watch this kid play, and he just has a don't quit attitude. The legs never stop moving, and I think that's admirable. One, that's going to make the fan base really like you when you're a guy that doesn't stop moving, trying to get that extra yardage. But I know Sonny Ship has brought this up. You talk about the lead back role. Does Josh Williams have maybe the size, speed, strength combo to be a bell cow back? I mean, look, I know that's kind of a phasing out process. We're seeing a lot of the great teams have like we talked about, a committee, 2, 3, a stable of horses to go to. What do you think, Williams? I mean, this is a guy that can, get 15, 20 touches a game, or are we going to see a little bit less, more in that committee we were talking about?
When I say, probably bell cow, I would probably mean more towards a guy who's just going to be on the field a lot more than the others. And I think that pertains to Josh Williams. That fits him to a T. I mean, his career, his season high last year in carries was 18. He had 17 a couple times as well. But he was just so dependable and trustworthy for this staff when he was healthy, from a pass blocking perspective, and from being able to get into the backfield and make plays without having the ball in his hands. That was something that I know the coaching staff really liked about him. They really felt like the offense just ran a lot smoother when he was out on the field because of all the little things he was able to do right. And I think that's what's going to give him the edge this year in terms of the snap count and how many snaps he plays. Touches, I would imagine he's still probably around the same. I think he's a guy that you want to get anywhere between 12 and 15 touches a game, whether that's running the ball or getting it to him out of the backfield via pass. But yeah, he's just a guy that I think you trust and you really know what you're going to get out of him. That was something this offense was really kind of looking for in terms of a backfield guy that they could really rely on towards the end of the season. And you said it, I mean, during their stretch there where they won 5 in a row and kind of positioned themselves to be a college football playoff kind of in the running for that. Williams was a huge part of that success offensively. And so, and you saw it when they didn't have him available for the Texas A&M game, how much they struggled, punching it in the red zone and getting those just finishing off that game. It was really tough on the offense, and so I think Josh Williams is going to be probably the guy you see the most out on the field. But I do think in terms of touches and carries, it will be a little bit more of a split backfield between him and a couple other guys.
And who knows? I mean, we saw it at some points this past season. I mean, if you got the hot hand, I don't think Brian Kelly's scared to say, hey, let's let this, the more carries he's getting, the stronger he's getting as the game's going on. And I think it bodes well for the young guys. We mentioned him earlier, Trey Holly currently on campus, and then obviously waiting to get to campus in the summer is Caleb Jackson. These two guys I think benefit from this situation. You have a lot of veteran talent to look up to. While they're both very talented in their own right, being able to kind of see and watch what these teams scheme against. How does a defensive team in the SEC look? I mean, these kids are getting onto campus for the first time. I think it bodes well for them to be able to watch from all the veteran talent. But time will tell, like we talked about. In May, when that portal opens back up, does a member leave? Does an Armani Goodwin decide to leave? It's going to be very interesting to monitor. Because, look, it's a loaded running back room in today's day and age. It's really hard to keep that amount of running backs and divvy up the carries like we were talking about. As we kind of float over to the receiver position, obviously, Jere Jenkins gone, Kayshawn is gone. So you see two very good options, I think we could say, leave LSU. But, Glenn, I think there's a lot of excitement, one, because what was brought in the transfer portal. We're going to talk about Aaron Anderson. But also the emergence of Malik Nabers. Now, many people outside of the LSU beat have hit on this already, but Malik Nabers kind of established himself as a number one, really, especially later on the stretch. I mean, I know that Purdue game was a little lopsided, and Purdue was really shorthanded, but still to do what he did. He threw a touchdown pass, had 2 completions total, and also, lights it up at the receiving end as well. You think Nabers makes that jump? I mean, this is a guy who I think could shoot up some draft boards for next draft cycle because the kid has all the talent, and he really kind of emerged on the scene this past year.
Yeah, he's a dynamic playmaker, and I think he proved that in the tail end of last year with some of his games that he had, and certainly in the SEC championship game as well. He caught a touchdown and had well over 100 yards in that game as well. I think he's returning as one of the best receivers in this conference, and typically when there's elite receivers in the SEC, they go pretty high in the draft, and I think he's certainly going to be a guy that LSU leans on heavily in this offense next year. I think he and the confidence that he built with Jaden Daniels last year, that is a pretty special connection that they developed as the season really wore on. You could tell that Jaden was really looking for him in key moments and in key spots down the field. And look, I mean, if Jaden develops the way that we hope he can, he's going to be taking more chances next year, and Malik is going to be on the positive end, I think, of a lot of those looks downfield. So, I'm super excited to see what Malik Nabers can do next year. Think he can certainly be a 1, 2 day, 1, 2, 3 round kind of guy when it's all said and done. And I think the thing that he does probably better than most is, when the ball's in the air, it's his. I mean, he is a guy that's not going to, let the defender, clothesline him or anything like that for a ball, jump in front of him for a ball. He's going to go up and get it. And so when you have a receiver that's that good, at making the adjustments in the air at the point of the catch, that gives the quarterback even more trust. And so I think that is going to be something that those two really continue to develop this offseason between him and Daniels. And I think he's going to be a well over 1,000-yard guy. And let's see if he can get in the end zone a few more times too. I mean, he was really efficient in terms of his when you were throwing him the ball, he was going to catch it. But certainly, I think he'd probably like to get in the end zone a little bit more next year than just 3 times.
Yeah, and with Kayshawn gone, I mean, this is a guy that is obviously going to receive more attention. So we'll see how does the staff combat that. Another guy that kind of burst onto the scene is a guy in Brian Thomas Jr., who I really liked watching down in the red zone. Guy that had 5 touchdown receptions. Another guy, Glenn, that you go back and watch the games, and he did a really good job of coming back to the football. Most notably, I think it was the Ole Miss game where he comes back and makes a nice catch. I might be wrong on that. I'm sure the fans will let us know. But this guy who plays really physical, and I think he complements, this receiving room really well because he's got some good size. But as a red zone threat, I mean, look, you have your X and Y receiver out there. We hadn't even got inside of the slot yet. I mean, what do you like about Brian Thomas Jr. and what he can bring with another year of experience under his belt?
And he's got a lot of talent, and I think we're all still waiting for that really breakout year from him. I mean, he had flashes last year, but there were also spouts where he kind of disappeared for much of the game, and that's a little bit on him. It's a little bit on Jaden Daniels. It's a little bit on the offense in terms of what they're looking for in a certain play. But I think Brian Thomas has all the talent in the world to really fulfill a large role for this team next year. It's going to be interesting. They have so many options this year in terms of guys that you have the talent to be able to do it, but just haven't been able to translate it to on-field success consistently yet. I think you can certainly throw Aaron Anderson in that boat. Kyron Lacy, I think, is a guy who has a lot of potential in this offense, but he just I think he caught a little bit of the late season blues last year in terms of drops, and so is he a guy that you can really count on to be a vertical threat? Chris Hilton Jr. is a guy who is returning as a former 5-star player, battled a lot of injuries last year. Can he be an option for you in that slot? And I think Brian Thomas is in that mold with those players, maybe just a notch higher just because he's been on the field a little bit more than those guys. But we're still waiting on it, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of chemistry he develops with another offseason under Jaden. Does he, will Garrett Nussmeier get a lot more reps this spring? And is he a guy that Nuss is looking for downfield a lot? I think that's a really good question that will certainly be answered in the spring. I'm excited to see how they divvy up. We haven't really touched on it yet, but the quarterback snaps, I think you've got to give Nussmeier some first team reps and see how it goes. And I think Brian Thomas is a guy that certainly can benefit from having Nuss behind center. There's just a lot of questions that I think are going to be really interesting to find out this spring, and certainly which receiver outside of Malik Nabers steps up and is that second guy. Is going to be a really important answer for LSU to find this spring.
Yeah, going back to Kyron Lacy, I mean, I remember seeing him in the portal, 6'3", 215. I mean, that's SEC size right there. You see what he can do and what he did at the Sun Belt level. If that translates into the SEC, there's a lot of untapped potential in this receiver room, and a big reason why this offense is really highly touted coming into spring ball. We'll kind of wrap it up here with the young guys. It's a talented class that they brought in, some high-end talent. You have a guy like Jalen Brown, who is that 5'11", 170-pound, kind of a speedster. But, I'm really excited about what this group has in Shelton Sampson Jr., a guy from Baton Rouge. Any of these guys maybe, challenge for playing time early on? I mean, no, Sampson Jr. is not going to be on campus till the summer. So what does it look like? I mean, are there reps available for these incoming freshmen?
I think so. I think they've got to, certainly, get those guys caught up to speed. I know Sampson's a guy who's on campus already. A couple of those receivers haven't gotten to campus yet, so they won't be available for the spring. But I think probably you're looking at special teams as as a role that certainly Jalen Brown can fill. I think Shelton Sampson might want to add a little bit more weight to him. I think there's certainly an effort going to be made this offseason to see what kind of improvements he can make to his body before you really just throw him out there against some of these big corners and linebackers. But they've got a lot of talent there, and I think that they're going to be able to be in an advantageous position to kind of bring them along slowly this spring. Certainly get the guys reps. I mean, that's really important.
Mm.
But in terms of running with first team and throwing them out to the wolves right from the get go. I think they have a really good receiving core of veterans that are ahead of them right now, guys that I think you can really expect to see a bulk of the snaps in Anderson and certainly Nabers and Thomas and we'll see what happens with Chris Hilton if he's available, but I just think that there's a lot of guys that kind of will have some opportunities that are ahead of them right now, but certainly they can compete for some of those snaps. But I like what Shelton Sampson is able to do in terms of his size. Certainly is going to be the future, I think, of this room. Jalen Brown, you could certainly envision him as a future slot guy in this room. But like I said, they're going to be in a really good spot with those guys because they can bring them along slowly.
Yeah, bring them along slow. That's a luxury to have right now with this room. And I think, too, what you talked about, there's Malik Nabers, and kind of the story of this wide receiver room is who's going to capture the opportunity. I mean, it's out there. There are reps out there. And look, like I said earlier, I mean, Malik Nabers is not going to sneak up on anybody this year. I mean, defenses are going to say, okay, if we take him away, that's going to be the game plan. Don't let him beat us. It may force somebody else to get the ball, and I think that's where it's the challenge for these guys to kind of step up. And the starts in spring ball as well. And you hinted at it. We're going to get to it. Next up is the quarterback discussion, which is going to happen, and I'm sure, Glenn, will be the most viewed and listened episode of the entire spring preview because I know a lot of people have thoughts on it, but we're going to get that. We might even invite Sonny Ship in on the mix to get his expert opinion as we continue to talk spring previews at the position battles. My name is Bryce Koon. This is Glen West. This has been the Go 24/7 podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. Whether it's the morning, the afternoon, at night, we appreciate all that you all do, liking, subscribing, and if you're a VIP member of the site, we appreciate that even more. If you are not, you just got to hit the link down below. We'll put that link down there. It takes you directly to the site and get a great deal going for you right now as you continue to get educated on spring ball. Baseball is getting ready for a big weekend series, Glenn. On the road, you just put up a great article about that. Kind of what can this team learn about themselves in a road tournament environment. Going to be a lot of fun to watch those guys play out there this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Going to be really exciting. I think, you might have a little bit of trouble finding the games unless you want to subscribe to the D1 Baseball 3-day tournament. I think it's $25 or something. Still on the fence of whether or not I'll do that, but if not, we'll certainly be listening to Chris Blair or whoever's there with the baseball team, Bill Franquez, and see what the baseball team can do. I think it's going to be a good weekend.
It will indeed. Appreciate you so much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit the subscribe button, set up notifications for the next time that we are live. This has been the Go 24/7 podcast.